Professor Du Weiming,
Yeah.
we all witness an extraordinary development in China in the last 30 years. For you personally, what were the most significant changes?
Everybody's aware of the economic change, of the political change, but I think perhaps to me the most important change is a change in mentality, in the mindset, in a different way of life. Before, China was very much controlled by one ideology, so the sameness, it was the purity of thought, single-mindedness, you can say uniformity, and very much dedicated to politics and command. And China was quite a kind of self-imposed isolationism. But in the last 30 years, China opened up. China became, in terms of the spiritual landscape, very complex. And China also moved away from uniformity to complexification, or complex. And the people were not just motivated by being loyal to the revolutionary spirit. The philosophy of struggle, class conflict, was replaced by a philosophy of negotiation, of discussion, reconciliation, now even using the term harmony. So the mindset changed dramatically, and now younger people are much more attracted to material goods, economic wealth, and the technical competence has been greatly advanced, and more emphasis on IQ than on, let's say, ethical intelligence. In other words, China, from an aesthetic society to become a consuming society motivated by market economy. And so this change has far-reaching implications for everything. In other words, China developed a market economy, and as a result, China has become now a market society, which means the marketization has penetrated virtually every aspect of Chinese society, not just the business community, but government, mass media, the academic community, all kinds of social organizations, but even, let's say, religion. And another thing to be noticed is that before the reform, China, Beijing, for example, was the capital of bicycles. But now with traffic jam, with pollution, actual water, food, and so the quality of life is being eroded, even though material goods have been greatly available. So the mindset, together with the economic, socio-political, and environmental condition, I think these are the major changes.
And how do you expect China to develop in the next, let's say, 10 years? And what challenges do you see?
Of course, I think I'm not an economist. I'm not going to predict the economic situation, but many economists, very seasoned economists, believe that Chinese economy probably is going to expand, not only for the next 10 years, but even longer. The Chinese political system probably will change, become more democratized, whether the leadership likes it or not. In other words, China will have to consider many centers of influence, not just the political center, the academic center, business center, and so forth. And China will have much closer relationship with not only the West, but with all the emerging countries, the so-called BRICS, now 5, with Brazil, certainly with India, but with Russia, and the Islamic countries, and even Africa. So China will be more internationally connected. But China will face major problems. We can look at them in terms of different contradictions. And the contradiction between the rich and poor, between the government and the society at large, between the urbanized sector and the rural area, between the coastal area and the interior. And also China will face challenges of all forms of pollution. Water will become scarce, will be a major problem. And yet, with all these challenges, China has a very resilient culture, for a long period of time, and China has a very intelligent, even brilliant, potentially intelligent and brilliant leadership, not just in the government, but in mass media and other places. China is now suffering from all kinds of corruption all over the place. But if you look at cultural China, not just mainland, but Taiwan, Hong Kong, Macau, Singapore, and the Chinese diaspora, you know the Chinese people are capable of developing very clean, effective government, such as Singapore. China can also develop a very strong civil society, like in Taiwan. And China is part of what I call the Confucian cultural universe. So in addition to the Chinese culture area, Japan, Korea, and Vietnam, these are all part of the so-called Confucian culture area. So China will have a lot of references for China to develop. China is a big country. Sometimes people compare China with Japan. That's very unfortunate, because we need to not only look at China as a political system, but China as the combination of many geographic centers. Comparing Japan with China is like comparing England with the whole of continental Europe, plus a very large part of Russia. And one additional feature that China faces is demography. Aging will be very fast. And so I think how China is able to cope with these kind of challenges will determine whether China will be basically successful developing society, or China may face irreversible troubles, both in the environment area or in political culture.
China and Europe have a long, sometimes troubled history.
Yeah.
What can Europe learn from China, and what can China learn from Europe?
I think a historical note is useful, because when the European Enlightenment began in the 17th, 18th century, the Enlightenment was, I would call, deeply and extensively influenced by Confucianism. Martyr Ricci was in China from 1610 to 1660, for that 50 years. And the Jesuits translated the 5 classics, the 4 books, into Latin. And then the Enlightenment thinkers became fascinated by these works, especially Voltaire. But Leibniz actually did a lot of work on Chinese philosophy. And Rousseau was criticizing Chinese philosophy, but he was engaged in a debate with Voltaire and Montaigne, and later, of course, the encyclopedists like Diderot. So the Confucian influence on the Enlightenment of the West was very well documented. But since the mid-19th century, roughly the Opium War, China became a devoted student of Western learning. China learned from England, from France, from Germany, and from Nordic countries, from Dutch, later of course from American culture. So China became a devoted student for more than 170 years. And China is still committed to learning from the West. China defines herself as a developing society. Even though economy may be strong, the second largest in the world now, but that's GDP. But by per capita, China is way below 100. So still a very poor country. And there's so much China can learn from the West. Science and technology, to be sure, but democratic institution, how to run a market economy efficiently, the legal system, major universities, multinational corporations. Not only that, but also core values, such as liberty, rationality, due process of law, human rights, dignity of the individual, and many other features of the West. But the time is ripe now for the West, Europe and the United States, to know that we're confronted with new challenges in the 21st century. We're confronted with environmental challenges, disintegration of the global order, financial crisis, terrorism, disease, not to mention nuclear threat. So these questions force us to look at the future by mobilizing all the resources we'll be able to mobilize. And so I think at the level of the core value, and certainly Liberty is great, but how about justice? How about fairness? How about equality? And rationality is great, but how about sympathy, empathy and compassion? We emphasize the importance of law. How about civility? If the society becomes litigious, that's no good. Human rights are universal values, but human responsibility is required. And the dignity of the individual is celebrated all over the world, but also social harmony, social solidarity. So a great deal of interchange can happen between Europe on one hand and China on the other. And I do think in the future, among all kinds of other modes of collaboration, the possibility of a dialogue between two civilizations focusing on core values may be extremely helpful, because great values do not necessarily come together. There are conflict and tensions. One society may emphasize this kind of value, the other society maybe the other one, so the kind of collaboration. So I think dialogue, a dialogical relationship between China and Europe is important. So far, we have all kinds of communications characterized as dialogues, but they're not dialogues. Copenhagen, evaluation of renminbi, trade, finance, these are bargains. These are pressures, conflicts, confrontations. But I think the genuine dialogue is very, very important, and the major institutions, universities, foundations, and so forth, should put their emphasis on this aspect of communication as well.
Well, thank you.